going to talk tonight on photo stacking with a macro photography camera. And you don't need a very expensive camera. It just needs to be a full frame camera. You can photo stack with a 3/4 frame, but it's not near as good. They're not much dearer, but they don't have to be flash fancy cameras. You do need a good lens. That's probably the main thing. Macro stacking, it's more work, it takes more effort, but in the end, the image quality you get from stacking can drastically improve your final product. They are very sharp photos, 3D photos. They sort of have a 3D appearance about them. The orchid will stand out a bit, and I'll show you that a bit later. Very fine detail. You can actually blow things up a lot more. All the subject in focus, and you have a blurred background. This is sort of half the principle. So first of all, glossary, the stacking, it's arranging a whole pile of photos, up to 200 I do, but here I've got 3, and I've done 3 so that this part here is in focus, then the second one, his tail's in focus, and then you put it all together and you have the whole fly in focus. And that's virtually the principle of it with just 3 photos, whereas when you do 200, it's obviously a lot shorter. So instead of the whole eye being in focus, it will just be the whiskers on the front here and it will go back. So you have that in focus and it goes back. And I'll show you that in a bit more in the next. Now this is 2 photos that I've taken. I took them today and I left all the sand on it, but I didn't have a photo of the same plant. So I took the left one without stacking and the right one with stacking, and that's the difference. And it makes it stand out more and it's clearer. Now this is my setup. Well, I've got it here, as light as possible. Just a good lens and a good camera and a pretty sturdy, but I didn't bring my most important one, and that's my little stool. Okay, so full frame camera, you can do it manually. You don't have to do it automatically. Some cameras have got it in it automatically, and you can get a unit called a Cam Ranger, which will actually do it for you if you haven't got photo stacking in your camera. Bluetooth capabilities gives you the opportunity. I actually connect my phone to my camera, and I leave the camera over there next to where the orchid is, and I'm not standing around where all the other orchids are. And I sit back and I actually take my photos and do the adjustments on my camera through my phone. It's really good when you have a sunny day and you can't see the lens, so I can't see the back of the camera. And also it's hard work getting down to have a look at the back of the camera nowadays. It's getting harder. You must have a stand. That's probably the most important thing. People can do it without a stand, and they can do it holding by hand. Some people can do it. It doesn't come up as good, and it depends on how fussy you are. But when you can blow things up like the little Ericolis there and see bits and pieces of the Ericolis that you don't see normally, it's pretty incredible. So a smartphone's probably the ideal, and you have to have a program on your smartphone to connect to your camera. I know Canon do it. I don't know what I think the other cameras do it. I haven't had any other, so I don't know for sure. But you need large SD cards, not just a small one, because you take 200 photos now. So I fill a card up pretty quickly. And of course, a small stool. I got my little stool. People have seen me on my little stool. They've also seen me fall off it. And of course, a lovely orchid. They're the main things. Now, there's a program that goes on your computer called Serene Stacker. Now, there's several different programs. I think Lightroom does it, and there is other programs. You've got to pay for that. It's $100 and something, but you pay for it and you've got it forever. But that actually processes the stacking, and I'll show you how that happens later. And Canon Connect goes on your phone. That's cheap, and I presume other brands will have a Connect of some sort, but I don't know what they're called. The best conditions for stacking, it's a bright overcast day. Early morning and late afternoon is ideal. It's when the sun's not too bright. When you have too much brightness on the orchid, it seems to reflect bits and pieces, which makes the stacking not as good. So it's a bright day, not too overcast. They're the best days. some days you haven't got any choice, but I always look at the weather and think, oh God, I'm going Tuesday. That sounds good. Little or no wind is good. You can dodge the wind a little bit, and I'll show you how to do that later. In the background, if you've got the background at a distance, it's a lot better. If you have the background close, the blurred background doesn't work as well. Sun behind the photographer is better. You can get all sorts of effects by having the sun behind the orchid. Sometimes that's really special. If you've got the sun coming from behind you, it's always a lot better. Plenty of time to check the surrounds and set up safely. That's probably one of my main little issues, in that when you stack like this, you're standing around. So I actually get my camera set up and I go out of the area where the orchids are, and then I start to work with the camera. I spend more time setting up than I do taking the photos. Full sun is difficult, shade is challenging, wind is a problem, busy background that is close to the subject, that makes it a bit hard. So if you've got an orchid and the background is like a grass tree or a lot of bushes behind, makes it a little bit harder. All green background and a green orchid is also very challenging. Sandy backgrounds in bright lights, always very challenging. And you use a lot more batteries because you take more photos, of course. So you can do it manually without having all these programs. And what you do is you set your camera up and you focus at the very front of the orchid. So if it's got an ear sticking out, you've got to actually focus on the beginning of that. And then you take a photo and then you turn the focus just a little bit, take another photo, turn the focus a little bit and take a photo. And you can actually get through and do the same without having all the programs. By doing that, you continue that to the end of the orchid, so the back part, or however much you want in focus. Sometimes you don't want all the orchid in focus, you only want the flower in focus. And I invariably get home and I've missed a bit of the back of the orchid and I'll get cross with myself. Automatic stacking, so that's when it's in camera, and you actually have to set your camera up to do it. You've got to have it in what they call live view. There's a few things here I could go into and I could talk forever, but I'll just say live view so that if anybody wants to really do it, they perhaps can do a little bit of research into it. And I think you can actually get a copy of the whole talk, can you? And you won't remember it all, perhaps if you haven't had anything to do with stacking. You've got to set the increments. So if you've got an orchid, and that's the front of the orchid, and that's the back of the orchid, and you want to take those photos to the point where it gets to the back of the orchid. The increments can be large and only take 4 photos, or it can be 200. The more you do, the better it is. But it's all a little bit of a balance, but that's the basics of it. So if your increments are small, you set your number of shots to however many increments you've got to get to the back of it. And I have a little bit of a trick in doing it. I'll show you, that comes up a bit later. For close macro, you've got to have your lens. So the lens on the side of the lens is this, an adjustment. So it's full affinity and 0.3 and 0.5 of a metre. So that sort of tell the lens where you're going to take your photo. If you've got that on 0.3 to 5, it's actually best to have it on affinity and just forget it. Otherwise you get caught out and it won't focus because the lens is not recognising how far the orchid is away. And it'll go to a certain point and stop and won't go any further. So if you put it on affinity, you can actually go back as far as you like. And the dilemma is you can have it right for 0.3 to 0.5 and get halfway through and then the lens won't work anymore and you've got to start again. There's also a stabiliser in most macros. Most cameras have got a stabiliser. You must have that off, or it's not must, it is better to have that off. If you've got it on a stand, if you're doing it by hand, you would use the stabiliser then and make use of it. You have your camera on AV mode. Now, I choose to do it this way because it's easier for me. Other people might put it on a different mode, but I find AV mode works for me. And then I can change the depth of field. And then the speed of the camera is all automatic. I don't even have to bother with that. So I just put it on AV so that I can change the depth of field. A single focal point is what I use. And then you can actually, because you don't want the camera to adjust to all the surrounds, you only want it to adjust to what the orchid is, and they're so blooming small, you've got to have it on that single small focal point. Auto focus is another one that's got to be in, and single shot and spot focus. Well, spot focus is the one I was telling you about, having the small focus. Settings will depend on, so if you've got a great big spider orchid with fillies hanging out in all sorts of directions, it's going to be a very deep photo, and you've got to go back a bit because it won't all fit in the screen. So all of the adjustments does depend on it, whereas if you're going to do a little unguiculata, it's only this high and you can get in as close as what you can get. And to fill the screen up, you probably don't even fill up the screen with one of them. It does depend a bit on how big your orchid is and how far you've got to stand back. Ground floor, you'd have to stand back. Oh, I stand back quite a distance. The other thing is, when you have white orchids or white flowers, and you probably will find this with your photography anyway, you take a picture and the blooming thing blows out and you can't see any of the differentiating marks of the orchid. It just goes into a blob. So if you put your focal point on that white part and your camera adjusts to that, then you've got a better chance. And then you turn your contrast down a step or two, and then it will bring it up. Now, to put this together, I've got a copy for 10. If anybody wants more than that, well then they might have to photocopy them, but I've done 10. It's as simple as I could make it for photography. And I'm not doing a photography talk tonight, but it is essential to know those principles for doing any photography, really. But if you're interested in it, you're quite welcome to have one of them. I won't go through that because that'll take me all night. So we're now ready to set up, and we've chosen how many photos we're going to take. So I'm going to take 50, and probably 50 is my average on what I take. So it depends on the depth of field, and I have a moderate depth of field. I don't go all the way down. Some cameras go down to about 2.5, I think. I don't go down that far, but I do go to 4. And sometimes if I'm in a heck of a hurry, I'll only take 10 photos, so therefore I up the depth of field. So that it only takes 10 photos, and I'll still get a fairly good result doing that. The other thing is, if you set your camera on, because mine does it automatically now, not every camera does do it, but I press the button, it goes, and it does the 200 if I want it to do, and changes the focus between each. And you can actually do it with your finger and take a photo, change the focus, take a photo and change it, but it takes a long time. And then the wind comes, and the sun changes, so it's a huge issue. So I put it on 10 to take 10 photos, and I press the button for the automatic to work, 10 photos, wait for the wind to go, and then I'll press the button, do another 10, and I'll do that. And I find that as successful as anything. When I get to the orchid part, I don't rush in. It's when the tourists, we all do it, all the tourists rush in. Oh, I'm standing in all the orchids. So I look at the patch and I think, that's the orchid I want because he's the best one. He's the one that I can get to without stepping over 6 to get to it. I can actually put my camera down there close because it's not got a bush behind it or a sun behind it, or it's facing in the right direction. So I assess this position first. Then I set the camera up before I even go in there. So I get it about like I've got it there. So that's about the height I want it, the angle that I want to take the orchid. The light's in the right direction. Background's pretty good. And I also look to see whether there's a way to step out of the patch. So the orchids are all around there, and I just make sure I can actually go in, put my camera down and then step out of the patch. The main one is to make sure your orchid's in one piece. How many times have you gone and taken a picture of a photo of an orchid and found it's got a tongue missing or it's got something missing? So make sure that it's all in one piece. And this is a process that takes a lot of photos and it's a lot of effort into it, so therefore you don't want to be wasting your time. Choose carefully, because going back to do it again has quite an impact on the orchids. So I set up the camera, get all the things all right. I go in and I put the camera in the right spot. Sometimes if I can't get in close, it doesn't matter, because you can actually blow these up quite considerably. They blow up a lot better than a normal photo. So if you're at a distance, it doesn't matter a real lot. You can actually blow them up, crop them and do things with them. And backtrack out, find a nice shady spot and I stick my stool down. And then you can see that I have my phone, and what I see on the phone is what's on the camera, and I can adjust all the adjustments on my phone. And the best part is, under a shady tree I can at least see the screen, whereas many times you get out there, you can't see the screen when it's nice and sunny. So then you've got to connect it to the phone. So there's a program called Connect, and I showed you that before. That's got to go on your phone if you want to connect it to your phone. You can do it without connecting to your phone, but I find that really handy. Even if you're taking just normal photos, that's handy. And then what I do is I take a terrain photo. So I take a photo of the area, and that says I've finished that photo, I'm going to go on to another orchid. And when you're going through to decide which ones to stack, you've then got a sort of a thing in the middle that says I'm on to the next stack, and it divides the stacks up. That's just a little bit. And when you can see, you can't actually see it as much, but I put the coriander, I did that today, and it showed all that hair on the corrie. Has anybody seen the hair on the corries? No. But on the computer, that shows up beautifully. It doesn't show up quite as good there. But when you think how big a corrie is, and they were really small this year, oh, they were small, and then you blow it up to, what would that be? 2 foot high, 18 inches, wouldn't it? That's pretty incredible. So you connect your phone, and you set up the focus and ISO, and the contrast can be done on your phone. So you can change all of them. You also need Serene Stacker and Photoshop on your computer. There is others. That's a bit of a picture of my carpet in the lounge. Anyway, that's the program on your phone, and that's what you see on your phone, but I didn't have a nice, lovely orchid on it. So the depth of field is blurred background. Depends on your time constraints. If you haven't got much time, I always find it very hard when I'm with other people and I feel they're sitting around waiting for me to be fiddling around taking photos. And it also depends if there's a lot of light and the wind is making it hard. I don't even bother to stack then, because I might as well just take a normal picture, and I've got my record. This is the different, whether you put it in shade or in sunlight. And that was a filtered sunlight, and that one's in shade. And look at the difference in those two photos. It's unreal, isn't it? It's exactly the same photo, exactly the same place. This is a stack which is showing you how you got the whole leaf and the orchid all in focus. And the background's not real blurred in that one though, because it's a bit close. A bit hard when you want the leaf. That's just a couple of examples of them. Native Orchids to South Australia Field Guide. Been working on it now for 2 years. Bob's been helping me, and between us we've been thrashing out quite a bit. It hasn't been easy because botanists don't agree. Everybody's got their own ideas what orchids are and what they aren't, and what their names are, and then they change their minds. So it's been quite an ordeal, but I'll just show you. That's going to be the front page, or the front of the book. Okay, and I've sort of set it up so that we have 2 like orchids. So in here we got Prausophyllum tortilis and Prausophyllum goldsacchi. There's a synonym, I've put it in as a synonym for Paraprausophyllum, because some botanists are wanting to call them Paraprausophyllum. Now, I've not gone into the science much at all. I've tried to make it so that it's for the bloke in the field who wants to look at orchids and are not real wrapped in the change of names and everything else. So I've decided to put both in. And then I've gone through all the taxonomy and the synonyms and the description. But perhaps the main one is the distinguishing features down the bottom here are a summary of what that is up at the top. So that's the things that make that orchid different to all other orchids as the distinguishing features. And then the distinguishing features there is what makes that orchid different to all other orchids. But then on top of that, I've underlined what this one makes that one different. So this one's green and brown and open incompletely, and that one's nearly black, non-opening. And that's basically to make it as simple as possible. If you want to walk into it further, you read the rest. If you want to look into it even further, go and read Jonesy's book. But I've tried to keep it as small and short, because then of course you've got your dots on a map which I find them useful. So, and then down here, somebody didn't see it before, but the time of flowering down the bottom. So that's how I've done the main ones. So, like I said, dollies. Now the dollies have been, there's hundreds of them. Everywhere I go, there's a new, different sort, different shape, and lots of unnamed ones and everything else. So I've not gone into trying to sort them all out, with dollies in particular. So Dollies, that's the full description, etc. And then I have a picture of all the different sorts. And there might even be more than that. I haven't even tried to put them all in there. But they're the different forms. And at this stage, they're fitting under the umbrella of Dollies. And down the track, somebody might do something different, but they fit under the umbrella of Dollies at this stage. And then I've treated the next lot a little bit differently. Okay, so we've called these striatum, and that's your full description. And then there's been 3 different sorts that have been identified, Bob's identified them, and I've called them variants. They're not been given a name yet, and we're trying to give them a name that people can identify with where it's from. So the Joanna variant and the Noracrina variant. This is still in the process of trying to work out what to call things so that it's not confusing for everybody else. Plus, we've used these names for 20 years and it's going to be hard to know what to do. We used for a long time. Anyway, I got talked down to that. So hilltop variant, we're trying to give them a name. I've not given them a map, but I've tried to put in, I haven't put them in there yet. That's still evolving, that is. So I've got to put in when they flower, if they flower at a different time than what they do here. Oh, that's right, I've done it on here with the different dots, colours. That's still a bit evolving. I haven't, not real sure whether I'm going to continue with that or not, don't know.